We chase the illusion of ownership, believing that the one with the most possessions wins. This is a deliberate misdirection, a game designed for the masses. The true titans of history, men like Rockefeller, understood a far more potent secret. The ultimate power isn't in what you own, but in what you control. I will show you his number one rule. Part 1. The modern world is built upon a carefully crafted myth, the virtue of possession. We are taught to aspire to own our homes, our cars, our businesses. But this is a gilded cage. Every asset you physically own becomes an anchor, a liability that demands your time, your capital, and your focus. It creates fragility, binding you to a single location, a single market, a single fate. The more you own, the less agile you become, chained down by the very things you believe set you free. This is the first layer of the illusion we must peel back. The yearning for ownership is a deep, primal instinct. It stems from a primitive need for security and a social desire for status. To have is to be. This is the logic of the herd. But the strategist, the architect of empires, learns to transcend this emotional need. They recognize that the feeling of security derived from possession is often false. A physical asset can be seized, destroyed, or devalued overnight. True security is not found in a static object, but in a dynamic system of influence that you can direct and adapt to any circumstance. Consider the unseen burdens of ownership, the mortgage payments, the property taxes, the insurance, the constant maintenance. These are the obvious costs. The more insidious costs are hidden. There is the mental overhead, the psychic weight of responsibility for these things. More importantly, there is the staggering opportunity cost. Every dollar locked into a depreciating or a liquid asset is a dollar that cannot be deployed into a higher leverage opportunity, one that could generate exponential, not linear, returns. Imagine a strong man who insists on carrying a 1,000-pound weight on his back everywhere he goes. He is strong, yes, but he is also slow, exhausted, and inflexible. Now imagine an engineer who uses a system of levers, pulleys, and gears to move that same 1,000-pound weight with the touch of a finger. This is the fundamental difference between the owner and the controller. The owner bears the full weight of his assets, while the controller uses systems to command resources far greater than his own with minimal effort. This principle is not new, it is ancient. The great empires of Venice and Genoa did not rise to power by owning every ship or every piece of cargo. They rose by controlling the critical trade routes, the ports, the insurance markets, and the flow of capital. They understood that it was far more profitable to own the toll booth on the bridge than it was to own every cart and horse that crossed it. They built a system of control, allowing others to bear the risks of direct ownership while they extracted value from the entire network. And so, we arrive at the threshold of a new paradigm. To build an unfair advantage, you must shift your entire mental framework away from the accumulation of physical things. You must begin to think in terms of asset-light structures. Your goal is not to have the most, but to control the most. This is not a subtle distinction. It is the central secret. It is the foundation upon which all great fortunes and unshakable dynasties, like that of Rockefeller, are truly built. Part 2. Let us define control with precision. It is not micromanagement. It is not the tyrannical oversight of every minute detail. That is the work of a clerk, not a king. True control is the architecture of influence. It is the art of designing the game board, setting the rules, and owning the standard by which everyone else must play. It is about being the creator of the ecosystem, the source of the protocol, the invisible hand that guides the flow of resources, information, and power without ever needing to touch them directly. The pillars of this modern form of control are intangible yet immensely powerful. They include your reputation and brand, which shape perception. They include the systems and processes you create, which dictate behavior. They include your intellectual property, which grants you a legal monopoly. They include the network you cultivate, which provides access and leverage. And finally, they include access to critical data and information, the lifeblood of any modern enterprise. These are the true assets in the 21st century. Consider the mathematics of power. Ownership leads to linear growth. If you own one rental property, you collect rent from one tenant. To double your income, you must buy a second property, doubling your capital outlay and your risk. Control, however, enables exponential growth. If you build a platform that connects thousands of landlords with thousands of tenants, you can scale your revenue almost infinitely with minimal additional cost, all while owning none of the underlying properties. The maestro of a grand orchestra does not own a single violin, cello, or trumpet, yet he controls the entire symphony. His power comes not from possession of the instruments, but from his interpretation of the score and his ability to command the collective effort of 100 musicians. Similarly, the creator of a dominant software platform doesn't own the computers it runs on or the data users create, but they control the entire digital environment, capturing immense value in the process. This form of power is fluid and adaptable. An owner of a factory is vulnerable to changes in local regulations, labor costs, and supply chain disruptions. They are fixed in place. The controller of a global brand however, can shift manufacturing between a dozen different countries and suppliers in response to changing conditions. Their power is not tied to a physical location, but to the intangible strength of the brand itself, which can be deployed anywhere in the world. With this refined understanding of control, we can now turn our lens to the master himself. How did a young bookkeeper from Cleveland apply this profound distinction between possession and control to methodically conquer the most vital industry of his age? The story of Standard Oil is not a story about drilling for oil. It is a masterclass in the architecture of absolute, systemic control. Part 3. The genius of John D. Rockefeller was not in his ability to discover oil. Thousands of wildcatters were doing that, gambling their fortunes on the hope of striking black gold. They were focused on possession, on owning the well. Rockefeller's revelation was counterintuitive and profound. The real enduring power did not lie in the chaotic production of crude oil, but in the methodical, centralized control of its refining and, most critically, its transportation. He observed that oil, once extracted, was worthless unless it could be refined and moved to market. He identified the bottlenecks in the system. While his competitors fought over patches of dirt in Pennsylvania, Rockefeller began methodically acquiring control over the refineries. Then, in his masterstroke, he used his volume to negotiate secret preferential rates with the railroads. He began to control the arteries through which the lifeblood of the industry flowed, and in doing so, he gained the power to set the price for everyone. The infamous Standard Oil Trust was a work of legal and structural brilliance. It was a mechanism designed specifically to exert centralized control over a vast empire of dozens of seemingly independent companies. Rockefeller and his partners did not need to own 100% of every entity. They simply needed to hold a controlling interest in the trust, which in turn directed the actions of the entire network. It was control, abstracted and perfected, a corporate nervous system with his mind as the brain. This reveals his core mindset. Rockefeller did not view himself as an oil man. He saw himself as a logistician, an organizer of chaos, a grand master on a vast economic chessboard. The oil wells were mere pawns, owned by others. The refineries, the pipelines, the railroad cars, and the tanker ships, these were the strategic squares, the castles and bishops that controlled the entire board. He played a different game than his rivals, and because they never understood his rules, they could never win. The outcome was a level of market dominance the world had never seen. By the 1880s, Standard Oil controlled roughly 90% of the oil refining and marketing in the United States. This was not achieved by possessing 90% of the oil reserves. It was achieved by controlling the critical infrastructure, the points of leverage, the systemic choke points. He could starve any competitor of transportation or refining capacity at will, forcing them to sell to him at a discount or face bankruptcy. The timeless lesson is this: in any system, whether it is a market, an industry, or even a social network, there exists critical points of leverage. These are the nodes through which value, information, or resources must pass. Do not be distracted by the noisy, chaotic production at the periphery. Find the quiet, essential choke point. Control the bridge, not the traffic. Control the standard, not the product. Control the platform, not the content. This is the blueprint for an unfair advantage. Part 4. Today's strategic choke points, our modern pipelines, are no longer forged from steel. They are coded in software, woven into networks, and built from data. The fundamental principle, however, remains identical. The greatest fortunes of our era are being built not by those who create a physical product, but by those who control the digital ecosystem in which products and services exist. The field has changed, but the Rockefeller rule is more potent than ever. Consider the case of Apple. For years, critics focused on the fact that they did not own their own factories, seeing it as a weakness. This was a fundamental misunderstanding of their strategy. Apple's power does not come from the possession of manufacturing plants. It comes from their absolute control over the entire ecosystem, the operating system, the proprietary chip design, the app store, and, most importantly, the brand. They control the platform, setting the rules and taking a percentage of every transaction within their digital empire. Look at the disruptive models of companies like Uber and Airbnb. They have become the largest transportation and accommodation providers in the world, respectively, without owning a single car or a single hotel. This would have been incomprehensible to a traditional business mind. They eschewed possession entirely. Instead, they built and now control a sophisticated digital platform that acts as the intermediary, the marketplace, connecting millions of suppliers with millions of customers and extracting immense value from that central position. The power of a brand is another modern form of control. A company like Nike owns relatively few factories. Their true value lies in the intangible symbol, the swoosh, and the powerful narrative of athleticism and determination they have crafted over decades. This brand gives them control over consumer desire and grants them pricing power far beyond the physical cost of their products. They control the story, and in the modern economy, the story is often more valuable than the object itself. Intellectual property serves as one of the purest expressions of this principle. A patent, a copyright, or a trade secret is a government-granted monopoly, a legal form of control without the burden of a single physical asset. The pharmaceutical company that controls the patent for a blockbuster drug holds more power and generates more profit than the company that owns the factories that produce a dozen generic medications. One controls a unique formula, the other merely possesses manufacturing capacity. This is not a game reserved only for the principle scales down perfectly. As an individual, you can begin to apply this mindset immediately. Stop thinking about what job you can get or what product you can sell. Start asking, what small system can I create? What niche platform can I build? What unique knowledge can I codify into a process or method that gives me control over a valuable outcome? This is the starting point for building your own personal pipeline of influence. Part 5. The first and most critical ecosystem you must control is your own name and narrative. Your personal brand is the ultimate intangible asset. It is the story people tell about you when you are not in the room. You must become the deliberate architect of this story. Through your actions, your content, and your consistency, you control how the world perceives your expertise and your value. This is the foundation upon which all other forms of influence are built. Secondly, you must focus on creating intellectual property, not just performing services. A service is rendered once for a one-time fee. Intellectual property, a book, a course, a proprietary method, a piece of software is an asset you create once that can generate value indefinitely. It transforms your knowledge from a perishable commodity, your time, into a scalable product. It is the shift from being a laborer to being an owner of an idea, a system that you control. Third, build a network, not just a list of contacts. A list is a static database. A network is a living, breathing ecosystem. A true network is built on mutual value, trust, and reciprocity. It is a system you can activate to gain information, access opportunities, and amplify your message. By becoming a central, trusted node in a specific community, you gain a form of control and influence that cannot be bought. You become the connector, the person who makes things happen. Fourth, develop a keystone skill. This is a single high-value competency that is so rare and so critical that it gives you leverage in any negotiation or project. It is your unique selling proposition, the one thing you can do better than almost anyone else. This skill becomes your personal choke point. People need access to it, and that need gives you a measure of control over the terms of your engagement, independent of any job title or formal position. Adopt the mindset of a platform builder. In any area of your life, ask yourself, am I just participating, or am I creating the space for participation? Instead of just posting on social media, build your own newsletter where you control the distribution channel. Instead of just attending events, host your own mastermind group where you control the agenda. Create a system, no matter how small, where others can connect and create value, with you at the center, orchestrating the flow. The practical application of this begins with small, daily shifts. Dedicate 1 hour each day not to doing the work, but to building the system. This could be writing one page of your book, documenting a key process, or having a strategic conversation with a key person in your network. You are moving from being an actor on the stage to being the director of the play. This slow, deliberate shift in focus from accumulating to orchestrating is the first step toward true sovereignty. Part 6. To master the art of control, you must first master your own psychology. Specifically, you must conquer the emotional impulse of attachment. John D. Rockefeller was notoriously unemotional and pragmatic in his business dealings. Assets, companies, and people were all pieces on a board, to be positioned, utilized, and, if necessary, sacrificed for the greater strategic objective. He was not cruel, he was simply detached. There is a critical distinction between strategic investment and emotional attachment. An investment is a calculated deployment of resources for an expected return. Attachment is an emotional bond that clouds judgment and prevents necessary action. You must learn to view your projects, your assets, and even your own ideas as investments. You must be willing to divest, to pivot, to shut down something you love if the data and the strategy demand it. This detachment is a superpower. The power to say no is a direct function of your detachment. The ability to walk away from a deal, to fire a client, or to abandon a failing project is a form of control. When you are not attached to a single outcome, you gain immense leverage in negotiations. Similarly, the ability to strategically disinvest to sell an asset that no longer serves your core purpose is what keeps you agile and allows you to redeploy capital where it will be most effective. You must train your mind to see the world in a new way. Stop seeing discrete objects and start seeing interconnected systems. Look past the things and identify the flows of information, capital, and influence. Where are the connections? Where are the dependencies? Where are the bottlenecks? This systemic view allows you to identify points of leverage that are invisible to those who only see a world of separate, disconnected possessions. This leads to a profound paradox of freedom. The less you need to possess any single thing, a specific job, a specific house, a specific client, the more power you have over your circumstances. When your identity and security are not tied to your possessions, you are free to make bold, rational decisions. This freedom from want, this strategic indifference, is what makes you a formidable operator in any field of play. Here is a mental exercise. Identify one thing you own that causes you more stress and mental clutter than it provides in value. It could be a physical object, a subscription, or even a responsibility you've clung to. Now visualize a scenario where you no longer own it, but still have access to its benefit when needed. This simple act of visualization is the first step in training your brain to separate the benefit from the burden of ownership. To think like a controller. Part 7. If control is the engine that drives your ascent, then leverage is the high-octane fuel that creates exponential acceleration. Rockefeller was not just a master of control, he was a virtuoso of leverage. He understood that his personal resources were finite, but through leverage he could command resources that were virtually infinite. Control, when combined with leverage, is the formula for creating a truly unfair advantage. The most common form is financial leverage, often referred to as using other people's money. Instead of using your own limited capital to buy an asset, you use capital from banks or investors to build a system that you control. This allows you to scale your operations far beyond your personal means. You maintain control of the vision and the strategy while others provide the financial fuel, amplifying your potential returns dramatically. Then there is the leverage of time, or other people's time. This is the art of delegation and team building. The goal is not simply to offload tasks you dislike. The strategic goal is to build a system of human capital that executes your vision, freeing you to focus exclusively on high-level strategy and the architecture of control. You leverage the time and talent of many to achieve a result that would be impossible for any single individual. In our connected age, one of the most potent forms is platform leverage, or other people's audience. Instead of spending years building an audience from scratch, you can strategically partner with individuals or organizations that have already aggregated the attention you seek. By leveraging their distribution channels, their media outlets, their social media following, their email lists, you can amplify your message and influence at a speed and scale previously unimaginable. The true magic happens when these forms of leverage are stacked and combined. Imagine using other people's money to build a software platform, which is then operated by other people's time, and finally promoted using other people's audiences. This synergistic combination creates a compounding effect, a positive feedback loop where each element amplifies the others. This is how small ventures can grow to dominate entire markets with breathtaking speed. However, one must approach leverage with the same calculated prudence as Rockefeller. Leverage is a double-edged sword. It amplifies both gains and losses. Control magnifies the consequences of your decisions. A mistake made with significant leverage can be catastrophic. This is why the psychological detachment we spoke of earlier is so crucial. You must remain a cold, rational calculator of risk, never allowing ego or emotion to drive your strategic use of these powerful multipliers. Part 8. We must now confront the moral dimension of this rule. The power to control is a tool of immense and formidable capacity. And like any tool, from a hammer to a nuclear reactor, it is inherently neutral. It can be used to build cathedrals of human progress or to construct prisons of exploitation. The choice rests entirely with the architect. This rule grants you power, but it does not grant you a moral compass. Rockefeller's own legacy is a testament to this duality. He is simultaneously celebrated as a visionary capitalist and a pioneering philanthropist who reshaped modern medicine and education. Yet, he is also condemned as a ruthless robber baron, a monopolist who crushed competitors and manipulated markets for his own gain. He was both a builder and a destroyer, a perfect embodiment of the ethical tightrope walked by those who wield this level of control. With great control comes an even greater responsibility. When you design a system that influences the behavior of others, you become, in part, responsible for the outcomes of that system. Whether you are building a social media algorithm, a corporate culture, or a financial market, you are the architect of that environment. You have a moral obligation to consider the second and third order consequences of your design on all its participants. This is the crucial difference between control and manipulation. Strategic control is about designing elegant, efficient, and ideally positive-sum systems where all participants can benefit, even if you benefit the most. Manipulation, conversely, is about designing zero-sum or negative-sum systems, where your gain comes directly and deliberately from another's loss, often through deceit or the exploitation of psychological weaknesses. To wield this power ethically, your system of control must be tethered to a purpose greater than mere self-enrichment. What is the mission? What fundamental problem are you trying to solve? What value are you creating for the world? A purpose acts as a guiding star, ensuring that your architectural decisions serve not just to consolidate your own power, but to build something of lasting and meaningful value. So, let this be a call not just to mastery, but to responsible mastery. Use this principle not to dominate others, but to achieve sovereignty over your own life, your own destiny. Use it to create systems that empower, that educate, that solve problems. The ultimate expression of control is not in commanding an army of employees, but in architecting a future that is better than the present, both for yourself and for others. Part 9. The final, and perhaps most misunderstood, aspect of this philosophy is that the ultimate goal is not the endless accumulation of wealth. Money, in the Rockefeller framework, is simply a tool. It is a byproduct of a well-designed system of control, a way of keeping score. To mistake the score for the game itself is the final trap for the amateur. The real prize lies beyond mere riches. The true endgame is sovereignty. This is a state of absolute personal freedom. It is freedom over your time, allowing you to decide how every minute of your day is spent. It is freedom over your location, allowing you to live and work from anywhere in the world. It is freedom over your associations and, most importantly, freedom over your own mind, allowing you to pursue the work and the questions that you find truly meaningful, unconstrained by financial necessity. When you control the systems, you cease to be a cog within them. You are no longer reacting to the demands of a boss, a market, or a client. You are no longer a servant to the whims of an algorithm. You graduate from being a player in the game to becoming the designer of the game. You achieve a level of agency over your own reality that is simply inaccessible to those who remain trapped in the paradigm of earning and owning. This is the ultimate transition that every great strategist must make. You must move from working in your life to working on your life. You are no longer just managing your career. You are designing it. You are no longer just managing your investments. You are architecting your own financial system. This shift in perspective, from participant to architect, is the final unlock. It applies to every facet of your existence. Observe Rockefeller's own final act. After amassing one of the largest fortunes in human history, he spent the last 4 decades of his life giving it away. But he did so through the same principles of control. He created philanthropic foundation systems that methodically reshaped global health and education. He used his control not to acquire more, but to exert his will on the future of humanity itself, a far greater expression of power. So, the journey we have traced is a profound one. It begins with rejecting the common illusion of possession. It progresses to the disciplined construction of systems of control and leverage. And it culminates not in a vault full of gold, but in a state of supreme, untouchable sovereignty. This is the ability to architect your own life, to fund your own purpose, and to leave a legacy that transcends money. This is the final, hidden meaning of Rockefeller's #1 rule. The rule Rockefeller mastered is not a business tactic. It is a fundamental reordering of your perception of reality. True advantage comes not from owning more, but from understanding the architecture of the world more clearly. This week, I challenge you to ask a different question. Do not ask, what can I acquire? Instead, ask, what small system can I begin to control? Instead of buying another tool, design a new process. Instead of chasing another follower, build a platform for your unique voice. Share in the comments the first point of control you will focus on developing. If this strategic dissection resonated with you, subscribe, and we will continue to decode the mindsets that have truly shaped our world.